You're listening to Crushing Classical, How to Thrive in Your Creative Career. I'm your host, Janet Ingle, oboist, entrepreneur, author, and business and creative coach for musicians. Today on the podcast, you'll hear my interview with Eunbi Kim, pianist and co-founder of Bespoken, and a new mother. I hope you enjoy this episode. My conversation with Eunbi Kim was absolutely fascinating. We really went into the deep questions of what it means to be an artist and also a mother, how you can use your energy best in a season of your life when you're forced to slow down, to give that energy perpetually and willingly to another human instead of to your craft. We talked about mentorship and motherhood and artistry, all of those things feel so closely related to each other for me. There's a myth out there about the self-centeredness of artists, about a certain kind of creator who reserves all of their best energy for their music, letting personal relationships fall by the wayside. I look at a work like Sunday in the Park, the Sondheim musical, which is all about an artist so selfish he ruins any chance of happiness for himself and for the people around him. And I think there's an element of truth to the idea that to achieve really great things, you have to bring tremendous focus to those things, to that work. But in my conversation with Eunbi, we looked at what it means to have accepted mentoring and help in your life and what it means to give back by mentoring others. We considered the sacrifices that our own mothers have made and what we have done and continue to do for our children. We looked at how it's possible to be artists and nurturing, loving humans. And neither of us will claim to have the answers to these questions, but there is a way, and it's just not as famous a way, maybe, as that of the focused, blocking out the rest of the world kind of artistry. Lately, on my socials, and in my blogs and newsletters, I've been talking about exquisite self-care, which for me is code for I have to protect my energy if I'm going to show up with my best presence for the things I want to show up for. If I'm feeling stuck and blah and not functioning well in the task I'm in, I stop doing that task and I take care of my needs instead. Maybe that's food or a nap or a walk. Maybe it's just a different task that uses my energy in a different way. You could hear this little conversation and you could think that I'm advocating for sleeping all day and ignoring my responsibilities, but I really do mean this as a generous act. If I can take care of my own needs first, then I have the energy to devote to other people. I have the energy to show up fully for my family and for my clients and for my orchestra jobs and my work. I can be of service because I've cared for myself. It's different with a 13-year-old than it was with a new baby, right? It's different when I was trying to get my book finished and out into the world versus when I'm preparing for a pop's rehearsal. The energy requirement is different in different seasons, at different times of the day, at different times of the month. And following my own needs as I feel them, instead of setting all of my plans in stone and forcing myself to do the work, is the best way that I've found to navigate this. And if this conversation, if any of this conversation feels helpful to you, then I invite you to leave a review on the podcast, share this episode on socials, tag me and tag Eunbi. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. Creating performances expressing dreamlike liquid elegance, pianist Eunbi Kim curates programs compelling audience to meditate on the parts of themselves that are deeply buried. Her intimate performances draw from collaborations with composers, filmmakers, and theater directors to create experiences beyond the boundaries of the piano recital format. Guided by personal experiences, her recently released album, It Feels Like, which debuted at #2 on Billboard's traditional classical charts, confronts the multiplicity of truths behind memories, language, and identity, and includes world premiere recordings of new works by Daniel Bernard Romain, Pauchi Sasaki, Angelica Negron, and Sophia Yanni. Eunbi currently serves on the board of trustees for New York Foundation for the Arts and is co-founder of Bespoken, a mentorship program for women in music. I know you will love this conversation. Remember when I interviewed Heidi K. Begay back in episode 12? She is all about helping musicians to thrive and grow, and she's one of the creators of the Ultimate Music Business Summit, which will take place in January of 2023. This event will feature more than 24 expert presentations and live panels over 3 days. I'll be one of the presenters, but I'm even more excited to attend myself and to learn from the experts in various aspects of our music business. Early bird tickets are on sale this month, and I have a special link in the show notes to get you connected to this summit. If you're building your own creative business or thinking about it, you might want to look into the Ultimate Music Business Summit. Eunbi Kim, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to speak with you. I've been reading through your gorgeous website and looking at your beautiful new album and studying your organization, Bespoken. I'm really excited to hear about all of these things and also your brand new daughter. But would you just start by introducing yourself to the listeners? Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and what you're about.
Sure. My name is Eunbi, and I'm a pianist. I'm also co-founder of Bespoken, and I guess I do a lot of things. Oh, and I'm a new mom, so I'm wearing different hats. And as a pianist, I perform mostly, I guess, what they call contemporary classical music or new music, experimental music, or lately I've been saying genre fluid music.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot because I was recently on this radio program, classical radio program, and the host was like, "This isn't classical music." And it got me thinking, it's not, it's not. And then and I started thinking, what makes something classical music, and what, do I want this to be called classical music? Why do I think it's classical? So anyway, I've been thinking of it. Well, I think it's just genreless or genre fluid music, or it has many different influences. And a very important part of my practice is collaborating with composers, commissioning composers. My recent album, It Feels Like, I commissioned composers Daniel Bernard Romain, Angelica Negron, Pauchi Sasaki, and Sophia Yanni. And the process for that is really great. I love working very closely and talking about the music. And I've also collaborated with theater directors, visual artists, film directors. And I have an upcoming residency and performance at the Baryshnikov Arts Center in New York City, where I'll be working with new media artist Shwen, and she'll be creating some really wonderful projections and some props for this music. As co-founder of Bespoken, Bespoken is a mentorship program for women and non-binary musicians. Since 2018, we've mentored over 75 fellows through the program, from classical, contemporary, and jazz, and it's been great. And I just became a new mom 2 months ago. My daughter Rumi was born in late August.
Oh my gosh, that's so new. It's so fresh. And all of the things you do are I want to ask about everything. Can I start with Bespoken? It's a mentorship program for women in music in some very specific genres that you're naming, despite featuring genre fluid music yourself. I just noticed that and found it amusing. How did this idea come about, and what is it that you are helping people to do, and how did you get it off the ground? None of that sounds easy to me.
Yes, it's been really exciting. It grew from a program with just 3 fellows, and now we have between 18 to 22 fellows per round, which is 3 months. So we have 3 rounds for the year, and summer we're off. I was approached by my co-founder Gina Izo about starting a mentorship program. She was a program manager or program director at Chamber Music America,
Mhm.
and she had invited me over the years to participate in the Chamber Music America conference as a speaker for the Next Gen program. And the Next Gen program was for the conference attendees 25 and younger, and we
Mhm.
would talk about professional development. And I was brought on a lot because since graduating from Manhattan School of Music in 2012, I had been producing a lot of my own work and my own projects, and that's what I would be talking about.
Yeah.
Um, she approached me about the mentorship program because the conference was only 3 days, and a lot of the attendees wanted further support or asked about further support or wanted to keep in touch. So she thought about making this year round through the mentorship program. And not only that, in a conference setting, a lot of times it's difficult to just like ask a question in front of everybody.
Mhm.
Um, Mainly because it might be too personal or it's like too individualized to the person asking it. And so there was a lot of one-on-one interaction after like the panels would be over. And that's when like all the really interesting work, I think, can be addressed between like peer to peer or as a mentor. So
Absolutely. Like in
um,
one-to-one situations or even in like really small groups where people feel safe to ask questions that might be perceived as dumb, that might be perceived as like only impacting me personally, and yet still I want to ask because it's a valid question that I have.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And so we have these one-on-one sessions once a month with each fellow, and also 2 group workshops.
Mhm.
And they're really helpful in their own ways. The mentorship works in many ways. I mean, I think there's also peer-to-peer mentorship that happens too,
Mhm.
because what we're doing is cultivating a community where everybody is supporting one another and sharing resources, encouraging each other. And a lot of this came from, the feelings that I had uh, when I was like starting out, when I first graduated, and feeling really isolated. Um, Especially because I was kind of doing things that were very different from the people that I graduated with, like from the very classical traditional training that we had together. And a lot of the people that join Bespoken have those out of box ideas that they want to launch or pursue. And so then Gina and I both have the experience to mentor them through that, but also they have this community where everybody is doing something kind of out of the box and kind of remarkable and extraordinary and different. So then they're not alone and they can feel like encouraged and confident about what they're doing.
Oh, it's so good, and you're speaking my language, right? I'm fully bought in on group programs that feel exactly like that. I work with oboists in that way. Um, Not so much in breaking new ground and creating gigantic new projects, although people absolutely can do that, but just like finding community and finding people around you who are working on the same things that you're working on so that you can be supported. Were you Did you feel like as you were building your career early on, did you have a mentor? Were you supported in this way, or did you have to like break new ground the whole way?
That's a good question. I had wonderful mentors. So I think
Oh,
the mentorship model is really, really important. And I had a wonderful teacher while I was in school, but I don't think that he was the person giving me the career advice or the mentorship that I needed. I really looked to other people who gave me that.
Hmm.
Angela Beeching was an early, very important mentor for me. I was very lucky to work for her during my fellowship at Manhattan School of Music at the Center for Music Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And she gave me a lot of really, really great advice. Like I credit her for everything because um, she really got me to start thinking about not what I'm supposed to do or meant to do, because I've been so brainwashed by being in classical music and 2 degree
Hmm.
programs. And
Sure.
she really got me thinking about what it is I wanted to do, and encouraging me to pursue the thing that I want to do and not worry about what other people are doing or what other people would think. And then it really was enough to just give me that spark to start. Um,
Yes.
yeah, start my journey and start my career.
Amazing. So this is the same Angela Beeching that we know from Beyond Talent, right? The
Yes.
author of that wonderful book.
Yes.
Fantastic. What a great opportunity for you to like have been exposed so early on to the idea that no, maybe you don't just have to play classical music because you just graduated from a conservatory. Maybe you can create the projects that are interesting to you.
Yes, it was a totally kind of visionary idea at the time. Now I'm like,
Right.
duh.
Yeah,
But
right, sure. And so am I now. But like in my 20s, all I wanted to do was audition for orchestras because that's all I knew to do as an oboist, right? I'm going to take an audition and I'm going to get into an institution of classical music because that is the career path that is laid out in front of me. So I love that this was exposed to you so early on and that now you're able to help other women to create similar things. What an amazing uh, gift to be able to give back to your community.
oh yeah, and I gain so much too because
Oh,
I
sure.
learn a lot from everybody, and I'm constantly inspired too by what the fellows are creating and doing.
Because it, in the same way that you're creating peer-to-peer accountability and group um, inspiration for them, of course you're creating it for yourself too. And this is such a key principle for me also, right? Find your people, surround yourself by the people who are doing the kinds of innovative things that you want to be doing. And even though you're not copying them, you're sparked by them and inspired and getting to create your own new things. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Do you want to talk at all about the music that you're sharing on this new CD and what your overall idea was for this album and this project?
Sure. Um, well, it's a very personal album, and I named it "It Feels Like" because it's a part of the title of one of the tracks. It feels like a mountain chasing me,
Hmm.
and I realized that I'm really interested in music that can express feelings that are hard to name,
Hmm.
and um, and sort of like memories and feelings that are sort of buried really deep within, that can come out and that can be conjured through music or
Yeah.
through ideas. And each of the tracks conveys something that's difficult to explain. So one of the tracks, "It Feels Like a Mountain Chasing Me," is about my parents. Well, I love my parents, but I also have some ambivalence too.
Sure. Parents are
And
complicated.
yeah, and
Families are
it's hard to
complicated.
talk about, and it's hard to really say definitively my feelings about my childhood. On one hand, I had a wonderful childhood, and on the other hand, it was very difficult in ways that I'm learning now. Another track by Pauchi Sasaki, "Mother's Hand, Healing Hand."
Hmm.
It's about this intense feeling that moms have when their children are very little, and you're pouring so much love into them. You're pouring so
Yeah.
much into them, and they're not going to really remember any of it.
Right. All of the work that goes into a new baby, and it will all like just sort of disappear in this brain dump when they're 3 years old, and nothing before it will ever get remembered.
Yes, nothing before will ever get remembered. And the composer, she said that this piece also uses a sample of my mother singing a
Mm.
traditional Korean chant, Mother's Hand, Healing Hand. And that's something she sang to me growing up whenever I was sick. Because
Yeah.
in Korean culture, we believe that mothers have these healing powers for their children. And so the inspiration behind that piece is, you know, wanting wanting to engrave your child's memory with this music
Mm.
and this thought that at one time when you were really too little to remember, there was all these things that were done for you and cared for you. So all the music is kind of in that vein of hard to express, hard to name,
Yeah.
but it feels like this. It feels kind of like like this.
What a gorgeous concept for an album as a whole. What a gorgeous concept for this piece that you're describing. And were you working on this project while you were expecting your child?
Yes. Yes. So as soon as I recorded it, I found out I was pregnant.
Ah.
And right before I released it, I gave birth. So it was a
Hmm.
very interesting timeline. And when Pouchy and I were talking about this piece, Mother's Hand, Healing Hand, it started off by just a general conversation about motherhood and mother-daughter relationships. So that's how my mom's voice came to be part of
Hmm.
the piece and the concept Mother's Hand, Healing Hand, the healing powers that mothers have, and also my desire to become a mother.
Hmm.
It took me some time to get pregnant, and it was very difficult for me. It's not something that I had anticipated, but it
Hmm.
was a reality that I had. It took me longer than I had hoped. So, so it was all those things that were behind this piece that was written.
That's so interesting. And it makes me think about, I we haven't talked at all about, I don't know, whether the piano felt easy for you, felt laborious as you were learning, like when you were younger, but it's suddenly just making me think about the amount of work that goes into any project that we're really passionate about. There's an amount of work that goes into making music at all. There's a tremendous amount of work and labor and love and attention and difficulty that goes into creating an album, creating an organization, creating a mentorship program, and certainly creating a new life out of your own body. Like some things feel more natural than others, but like there's work that goes into it.
Yes, it's a lot of work, but it's also, there's this quote I really love about how it it's wonderful when work feels like play or play feels like work, or there's it's hard to differentiate the two. That's how I feel
Mhm.
about these projects, about this album, about, having my daughter. I feel
Yeah.
like with my daughter, I feel like I'm losing my mind at times, and then she smiles at me, and I'm like, oh, I would do
Yeah.
anything for you. It's like a crazy, crazy thing, and that's kind of the same with working on something like an album. It's so much work. You kind of don't know what's going to happen. You kind of
Mhm.
don't know um, how it will be received and so forth. But you want to do it because it's something that is fun. That it's work, but also fulfilling and worthwhile.
Yes. Yes, all of that sounds so exactly right. And you're so, fresh in motherhood, right? You have a 2-month-old. How's that going? And how are you seeing the work going forward? And, like, no one knows. No one knows. We were chatting right before we got on here. Like, it's all experiments and it's all made up. But I wonder how is she affecting and impacting your work and your creative projects at this point?
Well, before she was born, I had this fantasy of, oh, I'll wake her up at this time and then I'll practice for a few hours and then I'll feed her. And, it was like
Uh-huh.
completely, it was a
Uh-huh.
fantasy. I call it a fantasy now. And then after she was born, like maybe the day after we came back from the hospital, I was like, okay, this is going to be very different than what I had thought. And one thing that became very clear was that it's a 24-hour job taking care of a baby, taking care of an infant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like they call it a fourth trimester for a reason, because they're really meant to be in the utero longer, but we can't keep them any longer, so they
Right.
just need constant care and attention. And so, as a result of that, I feel like every minute is really precious. My priorities are very, very different. Um, I, and as a result of that, I'm kind of thinking about moving forward, um, being more selective about things I take on, because
Mm-hmm.
I
Of
just can't just take on everything.
course.
Um, Economically, also, I'm thinking, okay, there are certain things I really shouldn't take on because the childcare is so expensive. So that's an
Mm-hmm.
added cost that I have to factor in with everything that I do. And then it raises an even bigger question that I've been thinking about, which is, um, it's based on something that I read, that the math will almost never make sense. um and it's not just in music, but generally, the math will almost never make sense when it comes to working and childcare. um and so what would need to happen for it to be worth pursuing a certain project or certain performance? So those are some of the things I've been thinking about. And it's very hard. It's harder than I thought, but this is what, these are the questions that we sort of wrestle with once you have a baby, a child. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
is it possible to be the best parent you can be and still work and pursue your own passions and dreams? It's really hard. I mean, I
It's
feel
it's
guilty if
so
I do
hard.
anything for myself.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And like, I'm sitting here listening to you talk, and it's exactly the same thought process that I've gone through. One thing that I heard that I really thought was interesting was this idea that the math is never going to work out, because it's not. But also, the math never works out for, say, an orchestra to get on the stage and play a Beethoven symphony, right? That there's a reason that they're nonprofit organizations and they're constantly raising money and like demanding money and begging for money, because the ticket price can't cover the cost of an orchestra. The math never works to
Never.
create an album, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're bringing in funding from all sorts of places, you're making agreements with people, and like, undoubtedly there's some out of pocket that goes into every project. The math never works. You're not going to make a fortune back from this album, probably. I don't know anything about your plans, but my guess is that there's no corresponding uh, lottery win that's going to come in from the release of any CD. But what a what a labor of love to create an album and also to create a child. And I guess the other thing that I find interesting in this is the idea that I the mom guilt is a real thing, right? And we all share this like, how dare I leave the house to go and do something that brings me as much pleasure as performing when there is a child here. And your everyone's math changes, right? It's one thing to have a 2-month-old infant, and it's another thing to have a 13-year-old, and it's another thing to have a 5-year-old. Like all of the things change all the time, and we're always making it up. But it's so interesting to think about sorry, I'm hearkening back also to your conversation about the motherhood piece and your album, and the beauty of all of this love that goes into, and care that goes into the child, that will never be acknowledged, that will never be even given reciprocated in any real way. Like it can't be. And also what you owe to yourself as an artistic human being in the world. I don't have a question. There's no question in this. I'm just talking.
Well, I
And
think everything you're saying is there's so much truth to it. And I think some of the things I figured out is that this is these really big questions, I think, are very individual to the person. And
mhm,
I know that what I've come to realize is that I think I'm going to be a better mom if I take some time to do things that are my own, and
mhm,
I have an identity outside of motherhood, and and I think that's going to be very difficult to maintain and sustain, but I think it's worthwhile to keep pursuing and find ways where that I can, because I know for myself that when I take a step outside of because now my baby is 2 months, so it's not like that first 2 weeks.
mhm.
And now I feel like I can slowly do some things for myself, and then
Yes.
after I started this week actually is when I just started practicing a little bit every day, and it's not a lot, but after I practice, I just feel so much better and more present with my daughter. It's just a part of just who I am, and I think it's something important that I realized. And at first, I was like, "Oh, that's not good. Like I shouldn't feel like that. I should feel like." Like I mean, there's just like such unrealistic expectations um,
Sure.
that are
Mhm.
kind of put upon us, but also we put upon ourselves. It's like I should be able to be with her all day and feel good and have energy. It's like maybe for some people, but obviously not for me.
Exactly. Because actually, like, babies are fundamentally pretty boring. Once, like, the adoration of the child, like I adored my baby when I had a baby. I adored her at every age, but also needed my own space. Needed to be able to do things that made me feel like a grown up, and made me feel like an artist, and made me feel like a person.
Yes, yes. I think that's not talked about enough, that we
Mhm.
all need that. And I
Yeah.
think it's important, and then it can help us become better parents, and it's a wonderful privilege to even have that option.
Mhm.
My mom did not have that option. There were things that she had to do for the sake of just survival.
Yeah.
And so, I was talking with her, and part of my guilt came from a little bit about from how I was raised. My mom sacrificed so much to raise me, and as in the early stages of being with my daughter, I was thinking, I should be able to do it. My mom did this, so I should be able to do it. There are moms all over the world that do this, and it's much harder. And then when I talked with my mother, she said, I had to do those things. And you're really lucky that I don't even want you to go through what I went through. If you have an option to still pursue the things that are important to you, to have a career, I want those things for you if you're able to manage it. Like you shouldn't feel bad about that at all. I didn't have that experience because of my own circumstances, but those were my own circumstances that have nothing to do with you. And yeah, I think there's this maybe an idea in a lot of our minds of like people maybe judging us or something as mothers,
Mhm.
and a lot
And
of
they
people
and
do
they are
judge
like
and stuff,
it's a
but a
thing.
lot of the worst judge and the worst critic is really yourself, I think,
Of
most of
course.
the time.
Of course. Yes, because all of these shoulds that you're describing and all of this guilt around like, oh, am I not doing this exactly the way it was done for me? Even though the way it was done for me was also not perfect because there's also no such thing. And we're all we're all making it up as we go along. How do we be artists and mothers? How do we bring beauty into the world in all of the ways? And as my child is getting older, how do I be in relationship with this person that I made but who is not me, in the same way that I navigate being in relationship with all of the other humans in the world?
Yeah, that's very, very hard.
It's so
That's
hard.
very, very, very hard. I mean, my baby's only 2 months old, and there's just so many things I'm worried about and thinking about and dreaming about, and in terms of like how I would like to relate with her. Um, and I
Mhm,
think about how I relate, to my own mother, how much I understand her now more than ever. It's like, oh, that's why she did that.
mhm.
This was not perfect, but now I kind of get why she did this. You know, and there's no perfect way of being. I mean, according to her, she wishes that she could have pursued a career, but as an immigrant, it was just very, very difficult to have options beyond what she was given, and
Yeah,
it was pretty tough for her. So
yeah.
it's a wonderful privilege to even have the option to think, whether um, or not, or how I'm going to navigate being an artist and a mom.
Yes, yes, and that all of that feels so, um it feels almost limitless, the number of options and choices and possibilities that there are, ranging from I am going to stay in this apartment and spend every minute with this child to I'm just going to leave this kid with somebody and I'm going to go and have an entire career. Like there's infinite space in there to play with.
Yes, yes. There's a ton of, I mean, those are the two extremes of the spectrum, and,
Right.
and those, I thought those were my two options. And then I've been talking to other artist moms and my
Mhm.
therapist, and there's so many different approaches. I
There's
mean, there
a
are people who can, I mean, Pauci, the composer of that piece, Mother's Hand,
Mhm.
Healing Hand, she said um, up until her son was 2 years old, she was the one who gave me some really good advice. She said to be really selective about the things that I do, because if you want to do fewer things, if you want to have, if you're going that route, and
Mhm.
then you can also start thinking about the next project that you're going to do, and then you can sort of sort those things out, apply to different grants, and do some fundraising and things like that. Those are sort of a little bit easier to do, and rather than practicing and like the creation process the
Mhm.
first 2 years. And because that's what she did, and she says she has no regrets. She was able to spend a lot of time with her son, but also kind of keep a presence in the field. And I think I'm leaning towards more of that approach.
Mhm. What's really interesting is I don't know that everyone thinks about how much non-performing, non-playing time it takes to be a musician and to like be if you want to create a project that you're going to do a few years from now, like there's a lot of just admin work and a lot of googling and a lot of relationship building and a lot of things that can be done from home. And I don't know that everyone thinks about musicians as having so much um just administrative effort that goes into the things that we're creating. the ideas that we're creating. So I just really liked hearing you point that out, and pointing out that it's okay for your creative energy to move in different ways in different moments in your life. Like, you just finished building a baby, so there's a lot of creative energy no doubt went there. And during the period of time when you're not sleeping a lot, when your kid needs you all the time, when it doesn't make sense to leave home for any extended period of time, there's so much you can be doing. And that really is a metaphor for our energy all the time, right? Like, my kid is 13, she's fine. But still, if I move through my day working with the kind of energy that I have at any given moment, maybe I have the energy of responding to emails. Maybe I have the energy of practicing the oboe. Maybe I have the energy that I could actually like send some outreach emails and like look for new projects and new beginnings of things. Did that make any sense? The just sort of the idea of letting your energy be where it is and having a vision of where you're going.
Oh, completely. Because I think, well, I was listening to this podcast recently, and it was I think the podcast was, oh, I forget what, but it was by Dr. Becky, who Good Inside, and
Okay.
her guest wrote a book called How to Keep House While You're Drowning, or How to
Hmm.
or something like that, how to maintain your house while you're drowning. And she talked about this similar thing about like where your energy is and matching what you're able to do. And then,
Hmm.
but what I liked about what she said was um, that the things that you have to do are morally neutral. And I've been sort of
Hmm.
thinking of it that way because I think part of classical music training ingrained in me this idea that if I don't practice, then I am not a good person.
You're a bad, lazy musician. Yes.
Yes, and it
Hmm.
was enforced, unfortunately, by many of my teachers that if you don't do XYZ, if you don't practice, if you don't do this, if you don't get good grades, if you don't, then you're just not a good person. You're not worthy of being a musician. And I think that kind of spilled over to to like almost every aspect of my life, where if I didn't get this done, if I didn't, from the smallest things, like if I have to forego, cooking just goes out the window, like right after you have a baby.
Yep.
It's like
Oh,
you
yeah.
don't cook, you don't clean, and um it's like, oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that, or but then I really like this idea that it's like it's just morally neutral, and it's like what you can manage at that time or in a given moment.
Hmm.
But it doesn't mean anything beyond that, and that's helped me a lot.
Yes, that's actually really beautiful and very nurturing. Like, this is what I got right now. Here's what I got. I'm gonna stand up and I'm going to like change the diaper on this baby, and maybe I'm going to play three scales. That's what I got.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think we live in a culture that's like very obsessed with self-improvement. And I do have to admit that I do read a lot of self-improvement books. But
Hmm.
this in the same podcast, they also mentioned about just like there can be a limit to that, and you don't have to just keep climbing this mountain of self-improvement to feel like you're a worthy person, you know?
Yes.
Like you're already a worthy person, um, eh, no matter what, you don't have to do anything. So that's really given me a great frame of reference for like I can just do this much at this time. And
Hmm.
also I think a great, speaking of great mentors that I have a really great mentor, Dr. Lisa Yui. And I was remember, a couple of years ago, I felt like I was in sort of this creative rut,
Hmm.
and I felt like really awful. Like I can't get out of it. I haven't been doing anything, and it was just this like period of time where I felt like nothing was going on. And that's like there's nothing more frightening than that for a lot of musicians, right? It's like
Oh, yeah.
um but she said something great that gives me a lot of perspective too, that, if we're lucky, we get to live long lives. And there's going to be a lot of time to do the things that we want to do if we're lucky. I mean, if you, and I
Hmm.
thought about that, and I thought about the average life expectancy, and it's like, okay, I'm just going through like this small little phase now, and then when it's over, I'm still going to have so much time to figure things out and do things and create and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's something that I always come back to too, that
Hmm.
and it's helpful now as a new mom. It's like I think eventually, um well, it's kind of scary to think of her in school one day. I know I know there are gonna be a lot of tears, but one day she's gonna be in school, and then she won't need me as much, and more and more she's gonna have her own independence. So
Yes. Yeah. I always, when we had a young child, every time things got logistically complicated, anytime I had to think about like turning down a gig versus paying an equal amount for childcare, my internal conversation was, well, she's not always going to be 4, but I will always be a musician. So what do I want to do with that information? And sometimes I would go one way and sometimes I would go the other. But knowing that this phase of life is only one phase of life and is only one season, and your energy will change and go someplace else after that.
yeah,
That was
I
really
think this
helpful
is
for me too.
great just for all musicians to know that there are
Hmm.
seasons and moments, and there's I also like uh The Big Magic by Elizabeth
Oh,
Gilbert.
it's a great book.
And I love what she says about when you're an artist, it's not like one beautiful moment to another beautiful moment to the next beautiful moment. You might have a
Hmm.
beautiful moment, and then there's going to be a season of this or that, and then in the season of young motherhood, it's going to be a lot of those questions, like if I take this gig, what
Hmm.
you could go one way or the other. I recently decided um, I was going to do something. I thought so much about it, whether or not it made sense to do it or not. And then ultimately I decided that I wanted to do it. But I know in the future it could be a different decision. Like you just said, it could be
Right.
one way or the other.
Hmm. And either way is okay because maybe both choices are morally neutral.
Yes,
Woo! Okay, I have
exactly. They are. They are.
yes. Oh, I love this conversation, Unbi. I feel like a little bit I have like wandered away from my role as I'm supposed to be crafting this conversation, and I was just having a conversation, which was charming and really enjoyable. I really want to thank you for being on today. Is there anything that you would like to say or promote or mention that I didn't make space for?
Oh, no, I think we covered everything. My album it feels like it's available to listen on all streaming platforms. And Bespoken will open up for applications for our spring round very soon. If you follow us on Instagram at Let's Be Spoken, or go to our website, letsbespoken.org, and sign up for our newsletter, you'll know when applications are open. And you can also find me on all the different social media sites, but I live on Instagram the most at Eunbi Kim Piano.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure that I have those links in the show notes. And thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe on your app of choice and leave a review too, because it really helps us. Don't forget to check out the Ultimate Music Business Summit. It's happening January 5th through the 7th, and it's going to have a ton of value for creative entrepreneurs. You can check out the link in the show notes and grab the early bird discount before October 31st. Our theme music was composed by Dream Vance. You can hear his newest album, Rama, on Spotify and Apple Music, and follow him there for more innovative synthwave music. You can find me at janetingle.com, which is also where you can pick up a copy of the Happiest Musician book, reach out to me with thoughts or questions about the podcast, or apply for a possibility session to explore your own portfolio career and thriving musical life. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.